American colonists were generally peaceful and productive, but also a fiercely independent bunch. The British, however, not so keen on fostering that independence. Fed up by acts of dissent against their rule, the royal crown imposed severe taxes to show the colonies who was boss. These taxes were known as the Townshend Acts. And to better understand their creation and effect on the colonies, here are 5 things that you need to know. Before the Townshend Acts, the British passed a hated piece of legislation called the Stamp Act, which taxed anything made of paper in the 13 colonies. We're talking contracts, wills, deeds, newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, even playing cards. Boston protesters hanged their city's tax collector in effigy and ransacked his home. Many colonial merchants embargoed British goods until the tax was lifted. Less than a year after its introduction, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. This only encouraged England to come up with more creative ways to squeeze the colonies for more money. Meet Charles Townshend, British treasurer and all-around unpopular guy in the colonies. Townshend was a financial whiz, but a clueless policymaker. He calculated that England could raise a ton of revenue by placing a tax on colonial imports, such as lead, glass, paint, tea, and paper. His rationale was that the colonists would be more willing to pay taxes on imported goods rather than on items produced locally. He couldn't have been more wrong. The Townshend Acts drew colonial fury. The most effective fight against them came from a farmer in Pennsylvania. All right, well, technically John Dickinson was a lawyer, but he published a series of essays under the pen name of A Farmer in Pennsylvania. Anyway, Dickinson argued that the Townshend Acts would set a dangerous precedent of taxation without fair representation in government. His letters unified colonial opposition against the British rule and influenced how Americans believed a government should behave. The ultimate showdown took place in Boston, where the Crown collected all taxes under the Townshend Acts. No one hated these acts more than the Bostonians, who relied on imports for their economy, and so they rioted. 4 British Army regiments moved to occupy Boston Harbor to maintain order in 1768. All right, spoiler alert, the British occupation of Boston was a disaster. On the night of March 5th, 1770, tensions boiled over when 8 British soldiers fired into a crowd of colonial protesters, killing 5. One victim was Crispus Attucks, an African-American man widely considered to be the first American casualty of the Revolutionary War. The soldiers were arrested, but later acquitted after a convincing defense by their attorney, future President John Adams. News of the Boston Massacre spread like wildfire, priming the colonists for their eventual uprising against the British.
Young people in large numbers came out and joined what became known as the Red Guards. These largely terroristic organizations were used to publicly humiliate, assault, and in some cases, even murder political enemies of Mao and the Communist Party.